Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Quorum Podcast. This is where academic medicine meets remote, austere, and resource-limited areas. Welcome back to the program. This is Aebhric Kelly. This week, I am with Brian Foy. Brian is doing a lot of training in Kenya. He and I go way back. We met about 15 years ago. Brian, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Retired out of the Marine Corps. I was in a force reconnaissance unit, did 22 years there. And while I was in, I became a paramedic. Every time I got deployed to a new location, I either volunteered or worked as a EMS, fire rescue, search rescue, or something of that source until I retired in 2004. As a paramedic coming out of the Marines, and met up with DMI, and I think that's where we crossed paths first time, and worked with DMI and the great other instructors that I was blessed to get under their wing coming out as a kind of a baby medic, I guess, since the Marine Corps doesn't have. And then did that for a long time, and then got into contracting, teaching, operational, medical, firearms, and all that. And then within the last 5 years, I was picked up as a mentor in Kenya, working with Department of State Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program. And just want to say full disclosures that, this is just my views and opinions and not representation of anybody, anything, or anybody.
So I have to ask, as a Marine, how in the world did you get paramedic rating? How did you get even a job as a medic in the Marine? Because the Marines are so proud of everyone's infantry. There's no medic. How did you manage that?
Yeah, so, we have our, I was in reconnaissance, so we have our SARC corpsmen who are phenomenal providers. But the Marines we don't have an MOS for medical, but as a new in the career, we were deployed on an operation, got fast roped in on top of a mountain, and one of the teammates pretty messed up his leg pretty good. I mean, it wasn't he still had a good career, but none of us, we all kind of stood around and just looked at each other like, well, what do we do now? So when I came back from that, I just went to my SARC corpsman and said, hey, teach me some medicine. And then from there, I kind of got the itch, and I'm the guy who, fell in love with it and made it a career, a lifelong passion outside of the Marine Corps. And then the blessings as I got promoted up in rank and got more and more into, ACLS PALS, ratings, intermediate and all that, I was able to teach at hospitals. On the posts I was assigned to, I worked out in EMS, and then I was able to bring some of those skill sets back to my brother Marines, and we kind of did in-house training where I was able to get some of them who were interested in medicine to go to EMT school. And then, I just been doing it, actually retired out of the Marine Corps to work in the EMS or search and rescue, or, got hooked up with DMI. So, I mean, that's kind of how it got there.
So as on active duty, you managed to get through EMT school and paramedic school on your own time.
Yes, that's so. When I went through EMT school, it was in the late 80s. The Navy actually held it. I was at Camp Lejeune, and the Navy held it. It was a 3-week fire hose course that I kind of begged to go to, and was finally sent and became a national registered EMT in North Carolina. And that's when I started first working in EMS. And then through my career, anytime there was a school or any training, that's my first time through DMI, as I was an active duty Marine. I was I think one of the only Marines that went through. And I just, any medical, anything I could get away from on weekends, nights, take leave, I did it. And then during paramedic school, I was actually running the amphibious reconnaissance course. So I did that about 50, 60 hours a week, and then did night paramedic school weekends, and then took time off to do my clinicals, my rotations. And I was an FTO at one of the local in Virginia Beach EMS stations. So I also had to do, I was an FTO, so I had to do my 48 minimum hours required to do that. So for the 2 years of my schooling, I was pretty busy. But I tell you, I mean, it was tough then, but it was one of the best things I could have done. And I would do it again looking back and recommend it to anybody who's considering.
Nice. So it took 2 years to go through paramedic. Who did you go through? What program was it?
It was Gulf Coast Community College.
Nice.
So, yeah, it was community college. I got enrolled because I was running EMS. So I was able to get in. And nice thing is as an active duty in the Marine Corps paid for the expenses. So that was a nice plus. And working in the same town and as you run EMS and an FTO benefited me too, because all my training officers through paramedic, I basically ran with them. And when I worked in the hospitals, those are the people I seen running calls. So it was an easier transition for me as an EMS person than some of my other classmates who came in cold.
And then the base hospital would let you work in the A&E department?
Yeah, so I worked out in town most of the time, and then on the different bases that I worked, I would go and just introduce myself, show them my credentials, meet with them, and then they would go, sure, come on in and work if you want. On Camp Lejeune at the time, I don't know if they do it anymore, but if you were an EMT, it didn't matter if you were Navy, Marine, civilian, anything, and you worked on post, you can run in the ambulances because they were shorthanded, so they would accept anybody to do that. And then I also worked out in town, so I was very fortunate. And going through paramedic, there was only about 4 of us that were military at the time, and we were the only ones allowed on to the Navy hospital, which that's where we got a lot of kids and children and female patients.
Nice.
Just working at the Navy hospital, and then working in Norfolk is the level 1 trauma center. So it was pretty eye-opening.
That's pretty impressive. You don't see a lot of active duty people being able to get a paramedic course whilst being on active duty and being in, well, as yourself with a soft background working in soft units. We just don't have that much time, and I'm impressed, Brian, that you were able to do that.
Ah, well, thank you. It was labor of love, I guess.
So you got out and then went to work with Deployment Medicine International. So how did you, all of us who worked at DMI had weird ways of getting exposure into it, getting hired. So what was your story, Brian? How did you get hired on by DMI?
So after, I want to say right during, or I think it might have been during paramedic school, or before I went to, or after, but I actually convinced my command to let me go to a class as a student. And going through it, one of the only Marines again, definitely only Marine in the class,
Yeah.
but very few of us went through at that time. Afterwards when we were working and doing all the TCCCs and stuff for pre-deployment, you've seen a lot more. But at the time when I went through, I was like one of the only Marines, and met up with Doc Hagman, and kind of kept in touch. And I actually, after I retired, I moved back to Florida. I was just waiting for my Florida paramedic cert, and I was going to work as a paramedic in Okaloosa County and then a firefighter in Bay County, because I had like 25 years of fire experience. So John kind of reached out to me and said, hey, if I fly you out here to Washington, Gig Harbor, and we have a discussion, would you be interested? And I said, sure. And then, the rest is history. So,
Nice.
it was a good move for me. I got a lot of exposure. I got a lot of training. Like I said, I met you. I met a lot of, other individuals that were phenomenal providers of all levels, and it really made me a better medic. So I appreciate you and everybody that supported me during those years.
I look back on DMI with fond memories and drinking from the fire hose of austere medicine, and just the people, the quality of instructors coming through. I learned every OEMS I learned from Hagman as well as from yourselves. It was fantastic. And you were doing OEMS. What other courses were you doing? Were you doing some of the BLS level as well?
Yeah, so I became a an instructor trainer for American Heart, and it was ASHI. Now it's HSI, and so my company is a training center. So I continued doing that and working in town and working with EMS, just kind of giving back to the community, but also just that passion of quality instruction, or at least hopefully giving quality instruction, and what I learned, pass that on to others, and maybe I know there's some instances I've been fortunate that guys came or women came back and said, "Hey, you remember me?" And I'll be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I really don't." And they'll give me the history, and I go, "Oh, okay, yeah, I got it." And they go, "You know what you taught us, even from DMI days, the back history, and the guys coming back from the after actions and going, man, you saved this guy's life and you were able to help me." It's just,
Hmm.
that's the rewarding of the part. We don't, as medics, we don't get paid a lot. We don't get a lot of recognition, but just being able to help somebody else in the time of need is sometimes all you need.
So what did you do when we all transitioned out of DMI? What jobs were you on, and how did you get into Kenya now?
So I did, as I kind of slowly backed out of DMI and just went from full to part time and doing mostly the LTT labs. I started working with a company, the Marine Corps Police Academy, and I was overall in charge of all the medical training that we did, and it was basically BLS training, and some other stuff, and became firearms and OC and left lethal and all that, and still kept in the medical profession. In Washington State, I also worked with Tacoma's tactical team and some of their TAC meds,
Nice.
and got really connected with their medical doctor that was on the team. He wasn't the med director for Tacoma, but he was the doctor on the team, and also a sheriff, which was unique to have a medical doctor as a deputy
Hmm.
sheriff. But and then went over to Special Ops Training Group as a civilian, and I was the SME for Visit Board Sea Ship or Maritime Ops, and designed a course on request. It's called Limited Space Rescue, and it was the SARC corpsmen came to me, and these guys are phenomenal, and they're like, "Hey, can we do something to learn and get our guys set up to be able to do limited space rescue with minimal ropes, and what we do down in on ships, what we do down in the wells of the ship and the black areas, and where somebody could be hiding or somebody could get hurt." So that was fun. So we did that and started doing that, and I'm not sure if they still do that, but we did that for probably 4 or 5 cycles of Muse that went through, and then went over to MSOS, which is the Marine Special Ops Schoolhouse for MARSOC, and I started off as the lead for the firearms, then became the project manager and started the clinic there. So they wanted 10 providers, paramedic level, to same equivalency as SARC corpsmen. So it was really fun. I got to set the clinic up, got to hire the providers, got a medical director that we worked with, and then did that, started the clinic, and that was pretty good. And then I went to O'Gara, did the same thing at the O'Gara Training Group, became the safety officer and started the clinic there in Virginia, got the medical director, doctors, nurses, dentists. And then through the ATA program, I just kind of traveled, did TAC meds and a bunch of other stuff. And then this job came open. And Kenya is a wonderful country. If nobody's been, you ought to schedule a little trip here because it's amazing. And got in here and really kind of, as soon as I hit the ground, I just reached out to some people online that had training companies and did PHLS and EMS. And, it's been almost 5 years now. And then they are just starting their Kenya Paramedic Association, and I'm on the board of directors as a foreign seat,
Nice.
and been really involved in their progression of EMS, and helping them and just doing a lot of classes for them, and it's just been a great evolution so far.
What exactly are you doing? You're doing some stop the bleed. What courses are you running in Kenya?
So when I first came here, I was here just as an instructor, and we did a program, and then we did a big FTX, and we had, as everybody does, injured officers, injured civilians, and we did a TAC Med course, which is a week long, 5 days, and it's kind of like a stop to bleed plus type training. It's based on TECC, TCCC guidelines, but it's really kind of for non-medical providers. But it's a good course, and it helps these guys and gets them into the mindset. So doing that, we realized that we did some great scenarios. Our providers, the guys were designated as medics, did a great job. And then when we had the local EMS showed up, and the turnover was horrendous, and the EMS didn't know who they were. Our guys didn't know who EMS was. And from that point on, we identified there needs to be a need to enhance the capabilities of these tactical teams. They don't have, like, in the Army in the U.S., you have your medics, 18 Whiskeys, 18 Delta. Same with the Marines. You have your Navy corpsmen, Air Force, PJs, so on and so forth. Navy have their corpsmen or their SEAL corpsmen. These guys here didn't have anything. So what I did is I got here on deck and I just started working and developing more and more medical training, and then came up with a advanced care provider course that we were going to run here. It was going to be 4 weeks. It was myself, another mentor, and then we had 2 local Kenyan surgeons that were going to run the course and then initiate the program to get medics within these tactical teams. And then COVID hit us. And so, we all know what happened during COVID, nothing. So when I was at home, though, my residential program manager reached out to me and goes, "Hey, ATA is kind of interested in, counterterrorism. Can you send me the white papers?" And so I wrote some white papers. This is why it's needed. And this is what we have currently, and this is where we can get to now. And so they bought off on it, and they call it an ATAC Med, and it's 4 weeks long. And so we're right now, as far as I know, the only country in this program that has run the courses, and it's been very successful. I'm going to kind of toot my horn because I'm an instructor trainer and a paramedic, so I can keep their skill sets up, and I can also update their information through the learning through science or me attending courses, and I bring that information back. But it's really worked out well. And now some of my TAC medics in one of the unit, ATAC medics or advanced care providers, they have been teaching not only the rest of their unit TAC med courses, the basic TAC meds, but they've reached out, and other agencies have asked them to support them. So they've done, just I think last year alone, close to 500 individuals in a TAC med course.
Nice.
So it's really reached out, and that's our goal. And that's what I'm working on now, is trying to push that program. We have another course this year, and then we're going to have some mini courses. So my goal is some of the programs I want to have per unit, advanced care providers or ATAC meds. And then I've designed another program where I'm trying to set up kind of like a combat lifesaver. So like if you think about how maybe, and I may be overspeaking, but what I've just remember is, like maybe you have an infantry unit where you have maybe some 18 with some advanced care providers, and then you have your combat lifesavers that support them. So maybe 2 or 3 really high skilled, and then you have 4 or 5 within the platoon that are, combat lifesavers. Then everybody's trained in TAC med or stop to bleed. And that's what my goal is now, is to start developing that program. And, I've got approvals, low ends on my side. So now we're just trying to figure out how to initiate it, timelines and setting it up. But that's where we're going with in the operational, paramilitary, military, and law enforcement side. And then on the civilian side, I teach all around. I do stop to bleeds. I'm doing one actually tomorrow. I've been asked to do a joint effort with another country, and I go to Lamu Island, and I've worked before I went home, I did 40 doctors and nurses in a BLS course, and I did 40 community healthcare providers, which are providers that are scattered throughout these communities that have some medical training, but in times of need, outbreaks, they go to the hospital, they get refreshed in training, they get the meds, and they go through these communities and vaccinations or basic care. So I was able to teach 40 of them and give them a first aid certification. And now I'm going back and working with the airport and more community health care providers next week. So
Nice.
it's growing legs.
So your ATAC med is like an EMT basic at a tactical level.
It's so the tech med and you're probably or I like to say I'm like you is I like the science behind why are we doing this, why are we putting a tourniquet on, why is their blood pressure spiking, why is this going on. So the tech med is mostly again about 3.5 day fire hose on how to stop the bleed, and then it's just the phases of care. And I thought this is good, everybody can use it, but we need people to understand why they're doing things, because we've had several attacks in Kenya, Westgate, Dusit, Embassy, Garissa. Things are happening, and then like anywhere, like mass casualties or any other attacks in the world, it could be days, hours, days before anybody can get in and start treating people. And you have people that are diabetics, people in cardiac, maybe somebody's pregnant, whatever the case is. So they are probably a basic plus. They're pretty close to intermediate. If you look at the older standards, the intermediate standards are changing, but at lower because they can do airways, they do eye gels and kings, and they can do IVs. They do limited pharmacology. They do glucose.
Nice.
And then more splinting, more assessment protocols, more extrication. So we give them the skills so they can take charge, kind of sit back and then kind of run the scene or take charge. And again, it's been successful. We've had some lives saved from those guys, and they've been out on missions and actually gotten some ticks and saved some lives. So it's working. So and even in the civilian side, somebody got stabbed, and guy remembered the class he went through. I teach at some of the ranges around here, Stop the Bleeds. For the range officers and for the civilians that just want to have an idea in case something happens. And one guy got stabbed. They were out of in another county. Guy got stabbed, and another guy stopped his bleeding, took him to the hospital, and he survived. So
Nice. That's impressive.
yeah.
So are you teaching prolonged field care as well for those EMTs?
So what I want to do, we have a training center down in Lake Navasha. It's massive. It's ideal for prolonged field care. I've had some interest from other organizations to do that. So what I want to do is I want to start kind of looking at two other courses. One is a kind of a medical course for the medics that do planning. So not like mission, but planning medical phases. You're at phase line red. This is where you can go. Looking at hospitals, what's their level of care, if they're mobile, if they're foot. So a planning phase for the medical providers, so they can brief back the senior officers. And then I would like to do a prolonged, because some of our border officers that have done this course are in the middle of nowhere, and it's literally even in town. It could be 2 hours in some of the areas that we work. 2 to 3 hours before you can get to them or get them to a definitive care facility. So these guys are working or with them for a long time. So prolonged field care. Now I got to keep it kind of down because we're limited resources. What we're doing is we're taking individuals, and they've all done a great job, but we're taking individuals that have really no medical, kind of like me as a Marine, nothing medical, and then turning them into medics. So I got to kind of take it slow, make sure they understand. They're picking it up pretty good, and now as they've been in it more, I can push them a little bit harder. But the first initial courses, we just got to kind of, if you remember when you first stepped into your very first medical class, and maybe you didn't have any, I didn't. And I'm like, wow, this is okay. And so that's what we're kind of getting. So prolonged field care would be a lot of basic skills, some advanced, because if we put a tube in somebody, now we got to really control them, maybe for hours, and we were really limited on pharmacology. If we start CPR, same thing. We can run lines, we can do glucose checks, but I want to come up with a plan or program that these guys can do. We don't have any rotary rescue here. We have it's all fixed wing, so you have to get somewhere to a landing strip before you can medevac them out, or you have to drive them out or carry them out. So that makes it challenging. But I kind of think it's kind of fun to get back to the basics. Sometimes as we get more and more into medicine and start learning and all the all the Gucci stuff that we get, and when you go to Soma, you see all the bells and whistles, and then you get out here and in the Africa or some of these other countries, probably where you've worked, and you just don't have that. It's kind of you got to figure it out.
Yeah, it's a mindset. The basics are what makes a difference. And as you know, in your SF background, it's the basics done well is the only thing that separates us from everyone else, I think. And PFC is the basics. And nursing care is nursing care regardless. And yeah, it's fun to walk around the Soma exhibition and see all the wazoo. Oh yeah, 150 grand, you can get this. Brilliant. No, I'll never have it, and it's going to be worthless to me if I do have it. So because we're out in the middle of nowhere, and so yeah, the basics is what's going to make a difference.
Yeah, 100%. And also here, resupplying. So there's like one place here that you can actually buy IFACs and actual operational, let's call it operational medical kit. So you can buy hospital beds and stuff like that, but again, we're not going to put that in our vehicle or carry it on our back. So that's the other thing. We do. I know a lot of people have likes and dislikes about improvisation and like improvised tourniquet or improvised litter or improvise this. I tell you, that's the way we have to do things here, and to get your mind creative to go. All right, what can I use? Look around. What's in your backpack? What's in your what's on the ground, and come up with stuff to make it work is also pretty. For me, it's kind of fun. I have a big background in search and rescue, so with being out in the middle of nowhere with nothing except what's on your back.
Yeah. So are you printing your tourniquets, or where are you getting your tourniquet resupply from?
So right now with the program I'm doing, I'm very fortunate again, and I have my immediate boss is 100% supportive. And actually, the next level too is very supportive. But we have so the programs that I work, the paramilitary, law enforcement, military, I get supplies through our program. The other programs I work with another country, so they supply. They have their money bucket that we don't touch. I don't touch, and then I come up with just improvisation. So I mean. We're trying to get the word out. We're trying to set up standards here. The company that does sell, I've kind of linked up with him, so I'm trying to push people to him and say, hey, if you need these things, I'll show you how to use them, but you have to purchase them. Your agency or whatever will have to purchase them from there if you're outside of my immediate program.
The Ukrainians have perfected the printed tourniquet and have good research showing that it's up to par. Would that be an option for you or for the people you're working with?
It would, but the biggest thing is immediate cost of how much to set up. And that's, we look at it. I look at things as, all right, if I have to spend $1,000 now, but it's going to last me for 100 years, then it's worth it. But when you're a fixed budget, it's a bit challenging where's my cost? So here, counties support the pre-hospital, and hospital basis. So the hospital. So counties they get a budget, and I'll just keep it at a rough. But they get a budget, and then they sit down and they go, all right, we got to put this much money in pre-hospital, this much money at the hospital, this much money in the community health care providers. The budget for the medical side. So they look at that, and I've talked to them, and I know this because they've talked to me about, hey, how can I get this? And they go, how much does it cost? And I look it up, and they go, oh, so that would be great if we can get those here, because that would, long run would save so much money, but the initial cost might be the scare factor.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of options less than 1,000, but it's a different mind frame that people need to get used to, and it's still new.
Yeah, we're the medical here has been going on. They're really starting to come around. They have an EMS system, They're having to work now on developing scope of practices and curriculum for EMTs and paramedic level, and who's approving factors. And like in the U.S., we have the national registry, so they're trying to establish something like that here. So with all that, but it's starting to grow legs and it's starting to take up interest, and that's a plus for all of us because I've been lucky to link up with some providers here, Kenyans, at the hospital level, doctors, some nurses, and some paramedic level, and some EMTs that are just a wealth of knowledge. And so we're all kind of pushing those, hey, we should get into this training, we should get into this equipment, and what can we do to help you? And so
The new EMS system in Kenya, are they adopting the U.S. system, or are they doing a degree paramedic?
they're doing a degree, so
Nice.
they're more of they're more of a commonwealth. So they're looking at they just had a meeting, the paramedic association with the UK's paramedic association, and so they've talked to they talked to the national registry. So they are not just they're looking at the U.S. policies. They've looked at the Australian, the UK, South Africa, even. So they're kind of just trying to put everything together, but I think they're going to lean more towards the UK route, where it's a
Nice.
2-year degree and then the different levels of paramedic,
Brilliant.
like the UK has. I think even Canada kind of follows that a little bit too.
They do, yeah. The PCP in Canada is still a BLS level, even though it's primary care paramedic. It's not until you get your ACP that you're an ALS medic. In Ireland as well, we have our paramedics who are degree paramedics that can't cannulate, and it kind of makes me a bit miffed that you have to get a master's level advanced paramedic rating before you can do cardiac drugs and cannulate. But it's Ireland. We're stuck in the mud a bit.
Yeah, there's a lot, I mean, and then you have the other side where people are doing probably what they shouldn't be doing. They're out of their scope.
Hmm.
But, like I said, here, it's so rural. A lot of EMTs I work with, they probably have 3 or 4 bursts under their belt, just because. So they may be with these patients for a very long time in some of these rural areas.
So you are doing a lot of TCCC, you're doing a lot of TECC and Stop the Bleed. What improvements are you seeing in your students when you compare what they've done or how they are able to provide this care before your course compared to after your 2-day or 3-day Stop the Bleed course or TECC course? What improvements are you seeing in your outcomes?
So, like I said, a lot of these programs, when they go through their initial training, kind of like, if you want to call it, lack of a better word, boot camp. It was like me when I went through the Marine Corps boot camp. I think we got 4 hours of medical training, and then that was all we got. So they get very limited, and I'm trying to work with their academy and set up some. I think we're going to bring some of their instructors into our next advanced care provider course, and start running a more advanced care for them. So I've had senior officers come to me after the training, and I do sometimes, Stop the Bleeds 2 to 3 hours, IFACs an 8-hour day, TCCC can be 2 to 3 days, PHTLS, and I'm working on now is ITLS program. But they've come to me and said, if I would have known this X amount of time ago, I could have probably saved X amount of my officers.
Wow.
Or I could have had my officers come through this training and we could have saved, or we could have survived some. And like I said, my one of my units, the medics and the guys who've been trained by the medics and myself and, the American teams that come over have saved lives. So the outcome has been really, really well received. I don't get a lot of, because I tell them that something happens, send me, after action so I can keep data on it. But, I hear a lot of word from mouth, but it has definitely increased their knowledge when they come back. I've been asked to go back to other units and do something again with them. Multiple. There's a EMS agency here. I probably ran 9 Stop the Bleed courses for the agency. And a lot of it too, I just, again, on science and what we learn in the books and, read online and listen to podcasts. They're like, wow, we didn't know that. Or Oh, that's new. I just did a BLS class, and they were still on the 15-2 compression ratio. And I'm like, all right,
Mm.
let's update your skill set. So, based on the science, not based on Brian. It's based on the science that is out there, and I can pull it up for you. And so the outcome has been really favorable, and their the learning curve has been really good on. Oh, wow, if I would have known that, oh wow, the light bulb's starting to flicker on top. And that's always beneficial for anybody who does any kind of training of any program.
Indeed. Have you considered publishing, Brian? You've got a lot of data here that you could do a pre-post Delphi type study, or just a questionnaire before and after that you could publish as this is the course we're running for this audience, and these are the improvements that we're having. It's kind of an easy one to write.
Yeah, actually, when I was just back in the States, I came up with so now I have, and it's not everybody here has computers or access. Not everybody here has emails. Not everybody here has smartphones. Um, so we're trying to make it a way that's simple that anybody can access the program. So I've just came up with a way that they can just use, either a QR code or whatever, or they can somehow go to a library in the hood in the area and get on and find this. And I'm trying to start again, and I am starting to collect some data. And like I said, I asked for after actions, and a lot of times it's after the fact or word of mouth, or somebody go, oh, I haven't seen you, because they deploy so much, or they're gone, or they're back home at their villages for they take like a month long of leave, and they come back and go, I didn't know if I told you this. And I'm like, okay. So trying to collect that because it helps me sell the program too.
Definitely. It gets funding, possibly.
And that's why I like, talking to you and getting on LinkedIn and some of these other blogs and stuff. I like to see what's out there, and I may post something and go, what do you guys think? Because, I just, like you're in the same business, hey, we tried this, some of the stuff that you're using, I've went out and looked at and probably purchased,
Mm.
and some other places I've looked at, and they go, hey, this has worked for me, and this is how I use it. And I'm like, oh, let me try it out here and do a test run. And so now I have a friend who just gave me a satellite, a portable satellite, and we're going to try to run and have my medics go out and try to use that to send back like a PCP report or a PCR report,
Nice.
and see how we can do that with these portable satellites, and see if that can maybe support us in some way. So I'm going to start doing that once I get back from Lamu.
So I'm curious, Brian. You said you are implementing some of the kit that I've been researching and publishing on. What have you purchased and what have you used?
So I think it was the handheld ECG. I think I asked
Nice.
you about, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I have that here with me. So, and it's come in handy because one of the hospitals that I frequently I visited, and they asked me to do an assessment on, they had two ECG machines and only one had paper. So
Wow.
so I mean, we're some of the places, the U.S. we're very. I go back home like you guys. You may have a bad day in EMS, but you're blessed.
Mm.
um, so something like that. I think there's some other. I'm trying to think of some of the other, but if I've asked you like, hey, what about this? And I think AED. You put out something to me about an AED, and I
Yeah.
researched that because carrying something like that when they're doing protective details or something is always beneficial. Right
Yeah.
now they have the big, huge Phillips or LifePak. I mean, so it's not really operational friendly.
Nice. Yeah, that's the cell AED is what I carry.
Yeah. So I mean, stuff like that I've researched and I've looked at. And I either purchased and brought it here and we tried it out and say, hey, this could benefit. And I write a
Nice.
little white paper, send it up my side, and then either it takes or it doesn't. But trying to get the information out.
Brilliant. I love hearing that. I love hearing about better options for the austere medic and having that concept tested out. And I really appreciate that, Brian.
Yeah.
So I have a final question for yourself.
Sure.
You are now the Minister of Health in Kenya. What improvements do you implement for the EMS as well as the police and tactical medicine?
So for the civilian EMS side, the improvements I would do if I had a magic wand and for one day I was in charge, I would look at who's teaching pre-hospital EMT. They don't have intermediate, so EMT and paramedic level courses. Um, what's their credentials? Get them credentialed in some form, either through like the UK fashion, US fashion, anywhere. Um, get a scope of practice written. Get our protocols written, medical direction, and then go through and get everybody current to standards and make sure and what's your pre hospital standards going to be, what's your scope of practice, what's your regulations, protocols. So I would start doing that really hard and heavy, and then also look at, because I got asked by Amref University if I would help them look at starting a pre-hospital program, and I'm all about it, if I can help. But I had told them one of the things I said, they go, what would you do? Kind of like you did. What would you do to start us off? And I said, well, we'd have to get curriculum, but then we'd have to look at who's going to teach the curriculum. And, hospital based aren't always the best to teach pre-hospital. And so we got to look at who's current, who's certified, or who could be capable of teaching pre-hospital. And then for the law enforcement, police, military, wildlife, all those guys, is that what I'm trying to do is I'd implement when they get through with basic boot camp as their pre-course, and I call it boot camp, but it's their initial phase of training. They then go do whatever specific training they may be assigned to. And here they'll go to a clinician, so they'll become clinicians. So they have a medical program, but those clinicians, and they do a good job, work in clinics. And so when now we have a deploying unit, it'd be like a Ranger battalion in the U.S. having to go to the local hospital and grabbing a clinician out of the local ER and go, I need you to be my medic. He would probably he or she would be a good medic, but the liability of being operational. So what I would like to do is now you have two options. You can go the clinical route and be in a clinic, or you can go the operational route and be still a clinician, but you're an operational clinician. So you've been through your basic phase of training. You've been through your second phase of training, which is your tactics, whatever the case may be. And now you're a clinician, and now you'll be absorbed into the unit. And I've wrote a white paper on it. It'd be 3 phases. So, through the initial boot camp phase or initial training phase, they would get the stop to bleed, or the TAC med, basic to everybody learn how to put tourniquets on, occlusive dressings, phases of care, and everybody would get that. And then once they graduate, the next guy would go through what we're doing now, the 4-week advanced care provider, and come out as like an EMT intermediate. And then as they go and they get more hours and we do more training and they get more clinician time and they work around, then we bring them back and we do another phase of care. And then that would be like their paramedic level nice. And then they can go. And that would also be a specialty that they can maybe do. And this is Brian talking, but if I can make it work, the Kenyan authorities would go, yeah, now you have a specialty as a operational clinician, and then you fall under that, and maybe that would help them with promotion, to be that specialist. And then now you have guys, when they deploy, they always have somebody that's medically trained. We're getting guys that are getting, we're having some problems on our eastern side of the country at the border, and guys are going out there, they're doing their job, but they don't have any medical providers. So if something happens, it's, all right, load them up, let's go. And there's no initial care until they get to the clinic. And, we all know in our lives, there's a phases of care for a reason. So, so those are the 2 things I would love to do. If I could wave a wand and Brian was in charge for a day, that's what I would initiate.
Brian Foy, it's been brilliant to chat with you, mate. We go way back, and I'm really impressed with what you're doing on the ground in Kenya, and I always look forward to seeing you in Somza each May.
Yeah, I always try to do my scheduling to get back, and I appreciate what you do and all the information and knowledge you've given me, and all the other guys that I've worked with. And if anybody has ideas, man, I'm an open book. Just bring it on, because I love to hear what everybody else, somebody might be doing the same thing that I'm trying to do in another country, and we just don't know it. So,
Well, thanks for being a guest on our podcast, mate.
yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for asking.
This has been a presentation from the College of Remote and Offshore Medicine. If you would like to earn CPD credits for this podcast, you can join the Council of Members. Being a member of the college gives you free CPD credit, free access to our virtual field guide, and discounts on our e-learning courses. You can join the team on our college website at quorum.edu.mt.